The desert had gone silent. Not the quiet of peace, but the hollow, scorching stillness that settles when everything living has already left or died trying to stay. Wind swept dust across the hardpan like the hiss of a warning. Overhead, buzzards. Circled, 3 of them. Lazy spirals, drifting lower. A single rider sat motionless on the edge of the canyon's lip, hat low over his brow, the leather band sun-faded and cracked. His horse, ribs showing, stood swaying. The man dismounted slow, boots crunching through sand and bone-dry twigs. He knelt. A body lay curled beneath a dying mesquite, barely more than a shadow. Arms too thin, feet blackened. Her lips were split open, dry as flint. Just a girl, maybe 10, maybe less. Apache, by the look of her braids and the faint red paint still clinging to one cheek. She shouldn't have been here, the man muttered, voice hoarse. Not in this hell, not like that. He reached for his canteen. It was near empty 3. Swallows at best. He hesitated, but she opened her eyes, wide, black, terrified. He uncapped the canteen and tilted it to her lips. The girl flinched, then drank. Every last drop. He didn't stop her. Thomas Reddick sat back on his heels, watching her breathe. Shallow, but steady now. He didn't know what he'd just done, only that it was the kind of thing you couldn't undo. Years ago, he'd ridden with the Union Army, had seen worse things than this. Worse even than Gettysburg. Had held his own daughter in his arms while she shook from fever, and that memory. It clawed up from his gut the moment he saw this girl lying in the dirt. Same size, same silence. That same look in her eyes. He exhaled through his nose. God damn it, Tom. The desert didn't care. Neither did the sky. His ranch lay 10 miles east, if it still stood. He'd ridden out looking for a lost cow 2 days ago and found dust, thornbrush, and bones instead. The girl must have wandered. For miles, maybe her band left her. Maybe the cavalry found them first. Apache raids had grown worse over the past year. Everyone in the territory knew it. Homesteads burned. Stagecoaches robbed. Bodies left in the gullies with arrows through their backs. Then came the retaliation, settlers riding in packs, or worse, soldiers with orders to clear land. Thomas hadn't joined in. He'd buried too much blood already. He lifted the girl in his arms. She weighed nothing. His mule snorted when he approached, wary of the new passenger. But Thomas tied her gently behind his saddle and laid the girl across. The blanket, she didn't protest. Didn't speak. He swung into the saddle, ignoring the protest in his joints. 50 years on this earth, and every one of them echoed in his bones. They started the ride home. The sun sank lower, shadows growing long and sharp. Coyotes yipped far-off warning or welcome, he couldn't tell. He kept his hand near the rifle, slung across the saddle horn. If riders came, they wouldn't ask questions. If the girl's kin found him, they might not care about water or mercy, but Thomas didn't turn back. Halfway through the ride, the girl stirred. She looked up at him, lids heavy, and tried to speak. Only a rasp came out. He said, surprising himself with the softness. You just hold on now. In the distance, the smoke from his chimney curled faint and crooked against the darkening sky. As the stars began to rise, so did something else, low and rumbling on the edge of his soul. Not fear, not exactly, more like a reckoning. He knew this land too well to believe mercy went unnoticed. Everything out here had a price. Sometimes it came with lead, sometimes with silence, and sometimes it came with fire. He adjusted the girl's blanket as they rode on. The prairie didn't forget kindness, and it sure as hell didn't forget betrayal. She didn't speak. Not the first day, not the second, not even the third. She lay in the corner of Thomas's cabin, bundled in wool and silence, her eyes following every movement he made like a deer waiting for the snap of a trap. He didn't ask questions, just did what needed doing. Boiled water, cleaned her wounds, laid willow bark poultices along her ankles and wrists, cracked and swollen from the sun. Each time he touched her, she flinched, teeth clenched tight as if expecting pain. Sometimes, when the wind rattled the walls, she pulled the blanket over her head and rocked gently, whispering something he couldn't understand. She refused food the first 2 times he offered, but the third time his best rabbit stew, thick, with onion and beans. She took the bowl in both hands and slurped it without looking at him. That night she curled near the hearth while the fire popped. Didn't sleep, but didn't try to run either. Small mercies. He caught himself watching her in the quiet hours, wondering, what had she seen? What had she lost? His own daughter had had the same way of folding her legs under her skirt, same downcast eyes when she was afraid. A shadow of memory tugged at him, unrelenting. By the end of the week, she followed him out to the corral when he fed the mule. Kept a distance, but she was watching, and someone else was too. The first sign came with a knock. Not a friendly one. 3 hard raps on the wooden post. Thomas opened the door to see Breck Tolliver and 2 other ranchers standing there, dust still clinging to their coats like bad news. Breck was tall and lean, his mustache wet with tobacco spit, and his eyes mean in a way that didn't change, even when he smiled. "We heard a story, Reddick," Breck said. "Word is, you took in one of them. Apache brat, ain't she?" Thomas didn't answer. Breck looked past him, toward the corner of the cabin. The girl wasn't there, but the blanket was. Her tracks were still on the floor. "You gone soft?" Breck sneered. "Maybe that war rattled your brain worse than we thought." Thomas crossed his arms. "She's a child. Was half dead when I found her. She's a red," Breck snapped. "Same as the ones burned the Mackenzie ranch. Cut down those kids." "Or don't you care about that?" "I care plenty," Thomas said flatly. "I also care about what kind of men we're turning into." "You're gonna turn into a corpse if you keep harboring animals like that." Breck leaned in, his voice dropping low. "This ain't a debate. You send her off by sundown, or we'll do it for you." They left without waiting for a response. Dust swirled in their wake. That night, Thomas sat on the porch with his rifle across his lap, the girl asleep inside. The desert air felt colder than usual. A coyote howled in the far hills. "What am I doing?" he whispered to himself. "Protecting a child? A symbol? Or just dragging my guilt behind me like a damn plow?" The past didn't answer. It never did. A few nights later, fire came for him. He woke to the crackle of flame and the choking sting of smoke. The barn, his hay, his tools, his winter stores was already ablaze. He grabbed the rifle and stumbled out the door, firing once into the dark. Hoofbeats scattered, no war cries. No painted riders. Just shadows on horses. White ones, he put out what he could, but the damage was done. The sky turned red before it turned black again. The girl helped him carry water, silent the whole time. At dawn, while burying the charred remains of a calf, he saw movement near the corral, a man, tall, wrapped in leather and shadow, a feather woven into his braid. His skin weathered, cheek marked with a long scar that split his face like a bolt of lightning. He didn't speak, just tossed a rabbit on the ground near the steps and vanished into the sagebrush. Thomas didn't chase him. Didn't need to. He'd seen eyes like that before during the war. Hunters, trackers, men who moved like ghosts. This one had Apache bones, but something else too. Older, quiet, dangerous. The girl noticed too. She said nothing, but that night she slept with her face toward the window. As if watching, over the next days, Thomas caught glimpses of the stranger on the ridgelines. Sometimes just a shimmer between trees, a silhouette at dusk, never close, never threatening. Always there. They didn't speak. They didn't wave. But it was enough. Then came the night she disappeared. Thomas had gone to the creek to check. The line for fish only gone 10 minutes. When he returned, the door was open. Her blanket was on the floor. Panic struck harder than any bullet. He called her name, though he didn't even know it. He searched the scrub brush by torchlight, rifle in hand. Heart a drum in his chest. Just before sunrise, she came back, not alone. The scarred man stood beside her at the edge of the porch, his hand lightly on her shoulder. She looked calm. Not afraid. Her eyes met Thomas's. He said nothing. Neither did the man. Then the tracker turned and walked. Into the mist. She entered the cabin without a word and curled back under the blanket. When Thomas glanced out again, the horizon was empty. Later, she pointed to the rabbit on the table and said softly, "Koa." Thomas paused. "His name?" She nodded. Koa. It was a start, but peace on the frontier never lasted. 3 days later, dust rose on the eastern trail. Blue coats, 4 riders with Union sabers and yellow neckerchiefs, led by a hard-eyed captain with a waxed mustache and polished boots. They dismounted. "Eyes cold, Mr. Reddick," the captain said. "You seen anything strange? Apache sign?" "There was a raid south of the river, family slaughtered. 2 children burned alive." Thomas tensed. "I haven't seen anyone but coyotes." "Funny," the captain said, narrowing his eyes. "One settler claimed you've been hosting a squaw." "Can't imagine that's true, of course." Inside the cabin, the girl crouched behind the curtain, barely breathing. "Mind if we take a look around?" The captain asked. Thomas stepped forward, blocking the doorway. "You got a warrant?" The officer grinned, sharp and smug. "We're the warrant." For a moment, no one moved. Then the captain laughed. "Don't do anything foolish, old man. You see anything suspicious, you let us know." They turned their horses and rode off in a trail of dry thunder. Inside, the girl collapsed to her knees, shaking. Thomas knelt beside her. "It's all right," he said softly. "They're gone." But his hand rested on the rifle again that night, and the wind, blowing in off the mesa, smelled like war. The sky had turned white, not with clouds but with heat. Bleached, merciless, smothering. The kind of sky that pressed down on you until even your bones felt thirsty. Weeks had passed without rain. The river was a memory, the well down to its last murky inches. The corn curled in on itself, brittle as paper. Chickens pecked at dust where grass used to grow. Thomas wiped the back of his neck and glanced over at Island, no longer just the girl. She told him her name under the stars. One night, Elin, friendly, in the soft syllables of her tongue. He hadn't spoken for a long time after that. Just stared at the fire and nodded. Now she stood beside him, barefoot and mud-caked, hacking at the cracked earth of the creek bed with a rusted shovel half her size. Koa worked further up, arms gleaming with sweat, pulling dry sand away like he was digging toward hope itself. They hadn't spoken much in days. There was nothing left to say that didn't taste like despair. A coyote howled from the ridgeline, low and hungry. It was answered by 3 more. They were getting bolder, Thomas knew. Smelled sickness. Smelled weakness, that night as lightning. Flashed somewhere far off, but no rain came. The livestock screamed. Thomas was first out the door, rifle raised. The mule was thrashing in its pen. Something large and silent crouched low behind it. A shape, all sinew and yellow eyes, sprang from the shadows. Thomas fired, but missed. A blur streaked past him. Koa. No war cry, no sound. Just a bowstring snapping. And the mountain lion crumpling mid-lunge, an arrow buried deep behind its ribs. The beast twitched once, then went still. Thomas lowered the rifle and met Koa's eyes. For the first time, he nodded first. The next day, Thomas collapsed in the field. He'd been checking the bean rows, crouched too long under the sun. When he stood, the light bent sideways and the world turned gray. He hit the ground hard, face first, dust in his mouth. Elin found him. Covered his face with her shawl, sat beside him, humming something tuneless. Koa returned hours later with a goatskin full of water, the scent of juniper clinging to his clothes. "A hidden spring," he said. Later, with a glance, no words. Just the cool of water trickling over Thomas's face. He woke at sunset, blinking up at 2 faces. One small and scarred by grief. One older, lined by war and wind, softened now by something else. Gratitude, maybe trust. Later that week, as the wind stirred the dirt into little ghosts outside the window, Elin spoke. It came slowly, her voice breaking through the quiet. "Father was medicine man," she said, her English halting. "Mother, she ran with me. Soldiers, they came at dawn. Horses, blue coats, fire." She pointed to the necklace she wore. "Beads and bone, Mother gave me, said, run until feet forget ground." Thomas's eyes blurred. He stared at the fire, unable to speak. Koa didn't react, just nodded once. Then looked away. They sat like that in silence, while the desert groaned beneath the weight of coming change. The next morning, It began. Brecht Tolliver stood on a barrel outside the post office, spit flying from his mouth as he rallied the others. "We tolerated too long," he yelled. "They steal cattle, murder children, burn homes. And now this sympathizers harboring red devils on their own land. You think they'll stop at our fences?" Someone cheered. Another cocked a rifle. "We ride at dawn," Brett growled. "No more warnings, no more mercy. We cleanse this land like God intended." Word traveled fast, even without telegraphs. That night, a ranch hand named Elijah rode hard to Reddick's land, sweat streaking his young face, hat in his hands. "Tom," he said, breathless. "They're coming, 30 men, guns, torches. Said you're a traitor now, said they won't leave anyone breathing." Thomas looked past him to the hills. The shadows moved different that night. He closed the door behind Elijah and turned to Koa. "We've got one shot." Koa nodded. They worked in silence. The barn was booby-trapped with broken glass tied to tripwires. Rifles were cleaned and loaded. A spare revolver was tucked into Ellen's satchel. They showed her where the north trail led if they fell. She was to run. No looking back. Koa carved stakes and buried them low in the brush by the fence. Thomas poured the last of the lamp oil into glass bottles. Above them, thunder rolled. The kind that made your teeth hurt? But the sky held its rain. Island braided her hair tight. Not like a child, like a warrior. When the night came, it came heavy. The horses were restless. Even the wind felt sharpened. Then came the sound. Hooves, dozens, fast, and torches like a swarm of fireflies burning in formation. Screams, laughter, gun barrels, flashing in the dark. Thomas gritted his teeth and chambered around. He glanced at Koa, who stood still as stone, bow in hand. Aileen crouched behind the root cellar, clutching the satchel. Her eyes locked with Thomas's. "Hold the line," he whispered. A torch arced through the sky. The barn lit up like the sun. Then came the first gunshot, and hell followed. The night bled into fire. The barn roared, embers shooting into the sky like a funeral pyre. Rain finally came, too late to save it, just in time to turn the dust into mud. Flames hissed against the downpour. Smoke curled thick around the house. Thunder cracked above. Gunshots snapped like dry twigs. Thomas knelt by the window, sweat and rain mixing on his brow, rifle hot in his hands. Koa moved like wind, never still, never seen until it was too late. Bowstring tight, arrows loosed with deadly purpose. A rider galloped through the gate, triggered the tripwire. Glass bottles shattered beneath the horse's hooves. The beast reared, screaming, its rider flung hard into a stake planted low in the ground. Silence fell over that corner of the yard. Permanent. Another man kicked in the front door, a bandana over his face, shotgun raised. Thomas fired once. The man dropped, mouth open like he just remembered something. More came. Brecht Tolliver's voice barked from the dark. "Burn, I tell y'all!" Thomas ducked as a bullet split the window shutter beside his face. Koa appeared in the chaos, a tomahawk in one hand. Blood streaked across his chest, face unreadable as the storm. He moved through the smoke like he belonged to it. Then dashed screams. Not theirs. The attackers, one by one. They fell back, confused, slipping in the mud, unsure if they were fighting men or ghosts, but one got through. He slipped around the back past the fire, past the traps, and found her. Isa stood by the root cellar, a knife in her trembling hand, eyes wide but steady. The man raised his rifle. Thomas saw him and ran. No words, just motion, just instinct. He tackled the man just as the rifle fired. The shot went wild, but not before it tore through Thomas's ribs. He gasped, coughed, tasted iron. The attacker staggered, re-aimed. Koa was already behind him. The tomahawk struck once, clean. The man dropped without a sound. Rain pounded harder now, steam rising from the fire-blackened barn. Brecht's men were retreating. Brecht himself limped down the hill, one leg dragging, face twisted with hate and something like regret. He didn't look back. Thomas lay in the mud, the world tilting around him. Every breath was glass. Koa knelt beside him, hands pressed to the wound. Elin crouched on the other side, tears tracking down her soot-smeared cheeks. Thomas tried to speak, lips trembling. Koa leaned closer. "Don't let them," Thomas whispered, "turn her into something she's not." Koa didn't answer. He just nodded. Elin pressed her small hands over Thomas's. You gave me water, she said softly, voice breaking. I give you my name. He smiled and lost consciousness. Dawn came quiet. The sun spilled over blackened ruins and blood-stained dirt. Crows circled overhead, cautious now. 3 graves sat behind the house, marked with stones, Breck's men. No one came to claim them. Thomas lived. Barely. His left side was torn, ribs shattered, breath forever short. He could no longer lift hay, ride fence, or shoot straight. The ranch was no longer his kingdom. It had become a scar on the land. But it was his scar. Koa stayed until Thomas could walk again. They never spoke of that night. They didn't have to, when it was time. Elin stood at the gate, a satchel on her shoulder, Koa beside her. Horses packed and ready. Thomas stood on the porch, leaning heavy on a carved cane. You be safe, he said hoarsely. Elin didn't nod. Didn't cry. She walked to him, took his hand, and pressed something into it. A small beaded necklace, hers, for when you forget why, she said. He blinked hard. Then she turned and mounted her horse. Koa followed. They rode west, toward mountains and mist, away from the ranch and the war and the dead. Thomas watched until they were dust. Then he turned, limped inside, and sat at the cold hearth. He didn't cry. He just stared at the necklace. In his palm. The wind shifted. A week later, rain fell like an apology. Grass sprouted where blood had dried. The well somehow tasted sweeter. Thomas stood under the sky, face upturned, and he spoke, not to anyone there, but to the world. 1 cup of water, he murmured. That's all it took to start a war. He paused. A small smile touched his cracked lips. And maybe to end one in a child's heart. Fade to Black. If this story stirred something in you, if you believe compassion can be more powerful than bullets, hit that like button, share this story, and subscribe for more frontier legends like this one. The West wasn't just built on blood, it was built on choices, the kind we make. Even when no one's watching,